Okay, so why would you develop for Media Center when there's so many different things you could do out there running on Windows as a much broader platform? Well, the potential reach of Media Center, everyone that's got Vista Home Premium or Vista Ultimate has Media Center with their solution, and the same will go for the majority of the versions of Windows 7. So you're talking, 90 million people as a potential audience for Media Center. Cost of entry, you can actually develop for Media Center using tools that you can download free of charge. The Media Center Software Developers Kit gives you help files, sample applications, and all the information you need to develop. And that's free of charge to download from Microsoft, as is Visual C# Express, which is the development tool that you'd use to actually develop the software with. And the other thing is you can develop some fun stuff. I can guarantee that the people that have developed applications such as Tuna-Free MCE, the reason they've developed them is because they've looked at Media Center and they said, this would be even better if I could just do this, this, and this. And because that wasn't there available, they've sat down at a keyboard and they've written the stuff for themselves. And then once they've written it for themselves, they've released it to the community so that they can get feedback on how good it is. There's always a bit of ego in there with hey, everyone using my application. But to get an idea of whether you've done it right or whether there's other things to add in. And you'd be surprised at the amount of feedback that you will get from people. Could you just add this? Could you just do this? And you can really develop some really fun stuff. And you really are limited only by your imagination and patience in what you do. Okay. The language that you use for Media Center development is called Media Center Markup Language, and that is it's part of what's called the Media Center presentation layer. The presentation layer is the actual environment in which you develop and MCML as the markup language that you use. It's derived from XML, and this is the core building blocks for Media Center itself. So when you see the music page with the scrolling gallery that shows you all the albums, or you switch that to show artists, all of that is done using MCML. So the same tools, the same techniques that are available to the people that wrote Media Center within Microsoft, those tools and techniques are available to everyone who wants to develop a third-party application. You write using a thing called, you write using Media Center Markup Language, and you use a back-end language such as C#. You can write in any of what I call the .NET framework languages, but C# is the one that's preferred because the majority of people that write for Media Center use it, and if you wanted to do any work, get any help off people, the chances are if it's in VB.NET, which is the other language that's available, you're going to get less help because people are less familiar with that language. Apologies to, there's a guy called Charles Petzold that wrote these seminal books on Windows. He's also written a book about Windows Presentation Foundation, which is another Microsoft technology, and he says applications equals code plus markup. And we talked about markup. MCML is that markup language. You add the code in C#, and that gives you your application. And the code has let's call it the application logic, so the bits that you actually do, such as taking the data from the BBC website to get the right information to put up all the images that are on the site, on Tuna-Free as an example, to get access to information about Media Center, access about to different websites or whatever it is your application does. That's all done in code, and then the user interface that you see in all the Flash animations, or Swish I should say, Flash makes people think Flash, the Swish animations that you see, as you saw in Tuna-Free where it zoomed in at the side when you started the application up, all of that's done in the markup language. And it uses a thing that's called Model View Controller, which basically means you separate out your program code from the user interface. What does that mean? Well, as I say, the model, which is the code, and the view are separated. In the model, you have all of the application logic. That's all done in this managed code language, C#. And you can't actually touch anything that's on the screen with that, which if anyone's ever done any Windows development, you'll know that you can set the values of text boxes and things like that. You can't do that with Media Center. You have to do that through a mechanism called properties. And properties are the one area that people get really confused with, the way it works. But so the model side of thing is a non-visual element, and that part is known as a model item. The other side, the stuff you see on the screen, the building blocks for the screen, are called view items, and they're the bits that make up the bits that you see on the screen. You're probably sitting there saying, why model view separation? The reason this is done is that the way Media Center works, if you imagine most applications that you get on a PC, they're written so that they appear on the screen on the PC. Media Center isn't. Media Center is written with the what's called the rendering engine separated completely from the application, and the rendering engine is where all that view stuff happens, and the application happens in the user experience framework, and that's the stuff that sits on your sits in the PC. The reason for this is that today you might have this running on your Media Center here, on your nice little screen at the front here, or on a projector, and that gives you the rendering part. The program part sits on your PC, and the rendering part is just going to the graphics card in your PC. But in the future, you might get yourself an Xbox 360 or another Media Center extender. And then what happens is, when you run Media Center for that extender, the program still runs on your PC, but the images that you see, all the user interface is rendered actually on the Xbox 360 itself. You start getting newer televisions that will have Media Center extender built in. So instead of actually having a box like a 360, you'll have an Ethernet cable you plug in the back of the telly, and that connects off to your PC and provides you Media Center experience. And that rendering is all done actually on the device itself rather than on the PC. That makes it very portable, and it means that to develop a new rendering platform is much, much easier to do. What's the bad news? This is a quote from a book that I read about Windows Forms programming, which is the traditional way of writing programs on Windows. Windows 1.0 programmers had a straightforward life. They had almost no choices about how to do things. Either there was an application programming interface, an API, or there wasn't, and most of the time there wasn't. This meant that developers had to build almost everything by hand. Media Center presentation layer is just like that. A lot of developers, when they first come to do Media Center applications, suddenly say, well, where's all the controls? Where's all the bits that I make my applications with? There are actually, just get back on that one. There are actually no controls, so there are no buttons, there are no spinners, all the things you see in the Media Center interface here. Which one's the control? So all of this stuff here, little pivots that go across the top, the gallery layouts, none of that exists. You have to actually write it all for yourself. So the way you do that is you have in your Media Center markup language, you have a thing called a UI. That's just short for user interface. And the UI encapsulates everything for a particular thing. It might be you'll have a UI for your page. So when you see a page like this is a UI, and inside that you'll develop other UIs that do things like act as buttons, act as pivot menus, and a pivot menu will have UIs in that act as pivot items, and so on. And so everything appears inside a UI, and the content itself, the actual stuff you're going to see on the screen, appears inside the content element. This is literally what you have to play with if you're developing applications in Media Center. You can put text on the screen, you can put graphics on the screen, and you have a thing called a color fill, which is basically creates rectangular boxes with a solid color. That's it. So everything you see, when you see Juniper, when you see Media Center itself, it is built from those three individual items, and everything is just built up from there. And you can see from the examples below, there are modifiers for them, things like you can set the colour of the text, you can set the font that's used, you can set how many lines it's going to go, how wide it is, and so on. But ultimately, everything is made up of those. So you're probably thinking to yourself, well, if that's the case, how on earth do I actually make anything? Well, you've also, as well as those three items, you've got what are called non-visible containers, and these basically just contain the things that you've got. If you imagine like putting pins on a board and putting a rubber band around it, and everything has to sit inside there. same kind of concept. They are panels and clips, and the difference between a panel and clip is a clip will actually stop anything from ever going outside of there, whereas a panel